Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Emily and today I'm doing a video of all the books I want to read this summer, and I've got a pretty massive stack. I'm not sure how many of these I'll get through. If it's a real big reading summer, then you never know. As I said in my other book video, I am writing my dissertation over the next year, and so I'm basically going to spend the whole summer just reading and writing. And these are books I haven't read yet, but books that I really want to read this summer. So to begin with, Sanditon by Jane Austen. I'm a big Jane Austen fan. I've pretty much read almost all her novels, and this is the last novel she ever wrote, I think. Her final and unfinished work. Sanditon takes place by the ocean, by the sea. I mean, it just feels like a summary kind of read to me. It's very short because it's unfinished, and so I'm really curious to read this, and I know that it's more experimental than some of her other works, and I'm such a big fan of Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Mansfield Park, Northanger Abbey. I love them also. But yeah, they say that in this, her final unfinished work, the writer sets aside her familiar subject matter, the country village with its settled community, for the transient and eccentric assortment of people who drift to the new resort, the town built upon sand. If the ground beneath her character's feet appears less secure, Austen's own vision is opening out. Light and funny, Sanditon is her most experimental and poignant work. So yeah, I'm so excited to read this. And following on in that vein, another book I want to read is Persuasion. I think those two are the only Jane Austen works I haven't read yet, so definitely on the list. I did watch the film adaptation with Dakota Johnson. I really enjoyed it, so I think I will love this. It seems very classic Jane Austen to me. Again, I'm pretty sure some of this takes place by the sea, so it feels quite summery. Also, how beautiful is this cover? I'm a big fan of pretty book covers. So next book I really want to read is Eve Bites Back by Anna Beer. And I have started this. The intro was so good. It was very gripping and really fascinating, funny, witty, super intelligent. I'm a huge fan of Sappho, and the back says, ever since Sappho first put stylus to papyrus, women who write have been labelled mad, undisciplined and dangerous, but none of that stopped them from writing themselves into history. So this book places female contemporaries of Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton center stage. Anna Beer delves into 8 female writers of historical time periods. We don't really study all of them typically. Whenever I see books like these, I get very excited about, it bringing to light some aspects of history and literature that get overlooked, and female writers have been historically very overlooked. They've got Afra Ben in there, who I love, and Jane Austen is one of the chapters as well, and so they kind of, like you can see here, where they have these male writers and then the female writers. So I'm very curious to read. I think I'm going to learn a lot here. They have Marjorie Kemp and Bradstreet, and I'm sure after reading this I'm going to have so many other works that I want to put on my to be read. So maybe I'll start with this. After Sanditon I might get onto this one. I read a lot of female authors, but I'm always ready and excited to read more. Anna Beer is kind of trying to create a new canon of literature through a female lens. I'm really interested. Eve Bites Back, fantastic title and beautiful cover. I remember seeing this a year or so ago in New York and being really intrigued. So yeah, Washington Post said Eve Bites Back isn't pleading for justice for female writers, it's indicating a system that has long ignored them and to some extent still does. It's a work of correction in every sense of the word. So excited to read that. Okay, next, this is Chiffon Trenches by André, and I was recommended this by my friend Dora, and I think we were talking about Emirata, like my body. I love reading books that are by people in the fashion industry. I love learning about it from behind the scenes and getting a peek into a world that is super exclusive and I guess mysterious and alluring. André Leontali, he used to work in Vogue with Anna Wintour. He's had such an integral role in the fashion industry over the last few decades, so this is his memoir. I've heard great things, and I know that this dissects the racism at play in the fashion industry because he was creative director of Vogue during the time that Anna Wintour was rising up in that magazine. So I think it's just going to document a really fascinating time in fashion as well. So it just says on the back, a deeply revealing memoir that captures the fashion world from the inside out at its most glamorous and cutthroat. Yeah, he's just iconic, so I'm curious to read it. I love reading memoirs. It says ideal reading material for anyone who found the Devil Wears Prada addictive but now needs a stronger hit. I know I'm going to enjoy reading this. Next is another novel, All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, and I have been looking at this book for a long time and decided to buy it recently. First of all, great title, a very intriguing title. I've always been super curious to read this book. I know it's a contemporary Japanese novel about a freelance proofreader. It says pulsing and poetic, modern and shocking. This is an unforgettable novel from Japan's most exciting writer. I'm very intrigued. Apparently it's about selfhood, awakening of selfhood, and they say her luminous prose and discursive compositions often smuggle in a refreshing, honest take on the ever-evolving theme of femininity. That is enough to make me want to read it immediately. It's that kind of book that the back doesn't give away too much, so I feel intrigued and curious to read and discover what this is actually about. So that's definitely on the list. Next book is Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood, and this is such a famous book, but I haven't read it yet. Sometimes you need a chunky book for the summer, but there's a time for the longer books and for the shorter books, so it's nice to balance it out as you go along in the summer. But I know that this is a Bildungsroman, and I love Bildungsroman, but I know it's also a story of coming of age, but also of becoming an artist. So I'm very drawn to those kinds of stories, and I always have been. It says, little Elaine doesn't understand the intricate behaviour codes of girls, but she will. I remember reading On Writing by Margaret Atwood and her talking about how she didn't understand the behaviour codes of girls as a child, and she found it really it was something that she found really fascinating and really confusing, and so I'll be interested to see how she kind of embeds that in this novel here. Especially I think with a coming of age novel, so much just comes from the author's life. I'm really excited to read this. Next book is Rebecca Solnit's Recollections of My Nonexistence, and I have read a couple essays in here. This is an essay collection, and I've read a few, but I haven't read the whole thing yet. What I've read so far really drew me in, and I'm really looking forward to sitting down and reading this. And again, I think essay collections are a great read to kind of take on holiday with you, or to just read throughout the summer if you're busy doing things, and then you can just sit down and read an essay in the morning or in the evening. And sometimes with a big novel you want to sit down and have a lot of time to read and everything, and so essays are more bite-sized, and I like that. But then they're so poignant and thought-provoking. And here we have her essay collection. This was shortlisted for a bunch of prizes. It talks about Rebecca forging a voice in a society that preferred women to be silent. This book kind of shows how she transformed into a writer and activist who speaks for the marginalized, galvanizing her own voice for change. People are calling this the landmark memoir from a voice of a generation and a rallying cry for generations to come, so I just feel very drawn to reading this. She's really a fascinating writer and such a leading feminist voice. Over the years I've read some essays of hers, but I've never read a full collection. I'm at the beginning, which the first essay or the first part of the book is called Looking Glass House, and so far I'm really drawn in, and her prose style is really enticing and beautiful. It does kind of almost feel like she's speaking directly to you. At the end of the first part it says, I can wish that the young women who come after me might skip some of the old obstacles, and some of my writing has been toward that end, at least by naming those obstacles. I've just been very drawn in because it is an essay collection and it is non-fiction, but it's also super poetic and visceral and vivid and evocative, and so I'm really curious to see how this continues. I'm really still at the early part of the book, so this is on my list for sure. Next book, I really want to read Hong Kong's book Recollections, and I read her novel The Vegetarian last year. I found it extremely evocative and it stayed with me for a long time, so I'm curious how I'll feel about this one. It seems quite different. I mean, her prose is very visceral, so I'm very interested to see how this feels to read. So this is about a woman who has lost her ability to speak and her Greek teacher who's losing his sight, and these two are drawn together. The back doesn't give away a lot, but they're saying that it's one of those novels that gives way to new depth every time you read it, so I really love those kind of books. And again, it's not very long, so I remember Vegetarian wasn't very long either, but she really packed so much into that novel, so I'm sure this will be the same in that regard, but it seems like a very different story, so I'm really curious to read this. Again, I know it will be one that will be very evocative and thought-provoking, and one that I'll definitely want to talk about with somebody else who's read it, so I need to find somebody who has read this. I am a big fan of dissecting books with my friends and you guys in the comments. So let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd really love to know. Next book I really want to read is Random Commentary by Dorothy Whipple, and I bought this at Persephone bookstore. So this book came out in 1966, but Dorothy used to write, I think her first book was published in 1927, and she had 9 very successful novels throughout her career. So she was one of the 20th century writers, with female writers, that Persephone Books, which is where I bought this, highlights. This is one of their most successful books in the store. They are a fascinating bookstore. I went to their shop in Bath, which is where I bought this, and they have a huge collection of female writers, particularly from like the 1900s, whose voices have been kind of lost over the years because they've gone out of print. And so they publish, I think, a book or 2 a month, and so they're reviving all these novels by female writers that have disappeared. When I found out about that bookstore, I was so excited, and I just spent so much time in there exploring, and this was one that I decided to pick up. So this is actually her memoir, I think, of her life in London, and I'm just really curious what it would be like to be a female writer in London in the early half of the 1900s. The blurb seemed very interesting to me, and I know that she worked as a novelist, and then it talks here about like a film studio as well. So it's going to be a very interesting glimpse into industries that I'm interested in, but in a very different time period, but through a female gaze. So I'm very excited to read that, and I highly recommend Persephone Books. You can check them out online. They have a biannual magazine that's fantastic. I think they might have articles on the internet. They get a lot of scholars to write about these female writers, and they have a lot of scholars looking into finding these lost works. So the work they're doing is super amazing. Every book has the same color cover, and then on the inside they have a unique design, and I've become a real Persephone book lover. They also have really interesting like manifestos and pamphlets and documents like written by Virginia Woolf or different female writers in that time. And I am a huge fan of Virginia Woolf, as we know, and Sylvia Plath. Like, I read a lot of female writers of that time, but it's nice to be introduced to a whole group of female writers that I actually didn't even know about, and to see that they're being republished again is super exciting, but also makes me so frustrated to know that they went out of print. But I'm very much looking forward to reading this. Following on in the Rebecca Solnit category, I've got another essay collection, and this one is by Susan Sontag, Against Interpretation and Other Essays. So this is one of her most famous collections, I think. I've read essays from, I've got it over there, her collection on women, and she's super intellectual, it feels very academic, but also like obviously very thought-provoking, very stimulating. The Times describes this as Sontag offers enough food for thought to satisfy the most intellectual of appetites, and I think that's a really accurate way to describe her writing, and you can read her essays over and over again and get something new from it depending on how you're approaching it. This was originally published in 1966, and it's never gone out of print, and has had a major influence on generations of readers and the field of cultural criticism. So she's, such a famous cultural critic. I've started reading this, just the beginning, and she talks about how, she says, I don't ultimately care for handing out grades to works of art, which is why I mostly avoided the opportunity of writing about things I didn't admire. Writing criticism has proved to be an act of intellectual disburdenment as much as of intellectual self-expression. The way she talks about art is really interesting to me, and she's, I think, one of the first critics to write about the intersection between high and low art forms, and to give them equal value as valid topics, is what they say on the back here. And she dissects like aspects of culture and art that maybe weren't being looked at the time during the 60s, and also it's just like a super interesting time period. Vogue describes this as a dazzling intellectual performance, and it's more of a dense consuming read. I definitely am going to find some time to read this. I'll be reading a lot of essay collections because I always love them. So a book that I feel I could just pick up at any moment and read is All's Well. This is by Mona Awad, And I read Bunny a couple months ago and was just so hooked into reading that. I'm anticipating hopefully feeling the same way about this one, although I've been a bit nervous to read it because Bunny very much gripped me, and I'm hoping this will too. I haven't read any other Mona Awad work, so this will be my second, and I am looking forward to reading it. My friend and I both got this for our birthdays. After I read Bunny, we were chatting about it a lot because Mona Awad's that kind of writer that just makes you want to talk about her books all the time. And I've talked about Bunny so much that like so many of my friends and family have decided they want to read it too. So I'm hoping All's Well will encapsulate the same kind of strange uncanniness of Bunny, but also be fun. And because Mona Awad studied fairy tales and she kind of has a lot of this fairy tale quality to her work, I'm pretty sure this might as well, but I know that this is about a college theatre director. She wanted to put on All's Well That Ends Well, but I think they end up putting on Macbeth, so I think there's going to be very many Shakespearean qualities at play here. I like how she layers these archetypal stories and characters into her work, so I'm very curious to see how she works with that here. People are saying on the back, with prose, Margaret Atwood has described as no punches pulled, no hilarities dodged genius. Mona Awad has concocted her most potent, subversive novel yet. All's Well is the story of a woman at her breaking point and a formidable, piercingly funny indictment of our collective refusal to witness and to believe female pain. I think this will be a really memorable read as well, so I'll be reading this maybe quite soon. One book I'm really shocked I haven't read yet, and that I am definitely reading this summer, is Pachinko. This has been on my to be read for so long, but Min Jin Lee came and spoke at Cambridge and I missed the talk, but my friend Emily went and she managed to get me a signed copy of the book, which is very iconic, and I am still kind of shocked that I have this personalized signed Pachinko, because signed books are like my favorite thing ever. So yeah, I know that Pachinko also got made into a Apple TV show, so I want to read this and then watch that. I remember Pachinko being talked about a lot during 2020-ish, and I think I meant to read it then and I somehow didn't, but I know that this takes place, this is like a sweeping novel. Yeah, it spans nearly 100 years of history, and they say it's an unforgettable story of love, sacrifice, ambition, and loyalty told through 4 generations of one family, which is such a feat to achieve that in a novel. I think generational stories can be very challenging to write, and I know I've heard such fantastic things. It's been so acclaimed, and it starts in 1911 and I think it moves through into the early 2000s, so this is going to be a sweeping epic. You want to read an epic in every summer at least, I think. So this is going to be that for me. And I think this might be another buddy read. I know Emily started reading it already, and I have some other friends who are reading it too, so we're going to have a lot to talk about. I just realized I had a couple more books that I wanted to show you. So one that I really want to read is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. And this one was recommended by Anahita in my Cambridge Student Recommends Books video. And I know that it's just like a really fun fantasy romance. My sister's reading it currently, and it's set in England, I think, about a like society of witches, and I think it's just gonna be really fun. And I just need something like this right now, that's what I feel. So this is up there on my next read list. And then this one, Small Bodies of Water by Nina Mingya Powles. Again, I think Kushiki recommended this in my Cambridge video as well, and I found a signed copy at Topping & Co in Bath, which is an incredible bookstore if you haven't been there yet. If you go to Bath, you need to go to Persephone Books and Topping & Co. And their Waterstones is good too. They have a whole Jane Austen section in there. But I found this in Topping & Co and I started reading it. The essays are incredible. Her style of writing, you just want to like sink into. It's so beautiful. So I'm already know I'm going to probably read it really quickly. It's a very moving collection of essays, so I'm really excited to read more of it and finish this off. And I also really want to read Sophie Mackintosh's work this summer, which my friend Audie has been recommending to me, so I know I've got so many good books to read. Yeah, and once I've read these all, I'll probably make a video and I'll give my opinions on everything. So that's the end of this video. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more books I'm reading this summer, and there's so many always on my to be read. I think I have a list that's like a couple hundred books, so I'm always constantly adding to it. If you have any recommendations for what you think is the perfect summer read, I would love to know, so please write them in the comments. I'm always really interested to hear what you guys are reading and what you're enjoying at the moment. Also, also let me know what you think of these books, if you've read any of them. So I'm excited to get started on this list of books and to add to it. Thank you for watching, and I will be back very soon with another video.